Hi, my name's Raylene. I'm a welder, been one most of my life. And last Thanksgiving, my own mother asked me not to come, said it would make things easier for everyone. Turns out, everyone didn't include me. What hurt more wasn't the disinvitation, it was realizing I'd been quietly erased long before that dinner. My sister called herself an only child, while I was still paying her law school tuition. They sat around a table I helped keep standing, and acted like I never existed. How do you stay silent when your silence is the only thing they've ever thanked you for? And what happens when you stop paying? To be forgotten? The call came in right after lunch. I had just finished rinsing my thermos at the back sink of the shop when my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen all week. Mom. We don't talk much on the phone anymore. Texts mostly. Hope you're well. Call when you can. Craig's coming by this weekend. Basic things. Things that don't require follow-ups. But she called. That was different. I stepped outside, past the steel bins and the scrap pile, and pressed the phone to my ear. Her voice was soft, measured like she had practiced it in her head. Raylene, honey, about Thanksgiving, she started. We've been thinking it might be easier if you didn't come this year. You know, just to keep things comfortable for everyone. That was it. No explanation, no ask, no pause to wait for what I thought. Just that. I didn't say anything. I let her finish whatever justification she had rehearsed. But it didn't matter. I wasn't invited. It wasn't like I'd been planning a grand entrance or anything. I wasn't bringing anyone. I wasn't even planning to stay long. Just the usual. Drop off the turkey. Eat the side dishes no one else wanted to claim. Smile through the awkward conversations, and leave before the wine started making people too honest. But still, I had ordered the smoked bird from the same place I had every year since Dad passed. I'd paid in advance. I'd even picked out a cinnamon glaze to try this time, thinking it might actually make a difference this year. Comfortable, I whispered after the call ended. Comfortable for who? I walked back into the shop and nodded to Mike, one of my guys, who didn't ask why I looked like I'd swallowed a brick. I didn't want to cry in front of him, or anyone, really. So I put my helmet on. The Ray sticker on the side was peeling from years of heat and time. Dad had given me that name when I was 15, and welding my first toolbox frame. He was the one who told me I had hands smarter than most heads. He was also the last person in the family who ever introduced me proudly. I powered up the torch. The hiss of gas and flash of blue light grounded me. Sparks flew, metal bent. Everything made sense again, until the job was done and I was left with silence. After my shift, I took the long way home. The road curved through the edge of town, past the feed store and the billboard advertising Jolene's firm in training as future legal leaders. Her photo was there, arms crossed, confident, clean, everything in place. I pulled into my driveway just as dusk was settling. The streetlights hadn't come on yet, but I didn't bother turning on my porch light. Inside, the house was quiet. My boots landed next to the bench by the door. I walked straight to the fridge and opened it, staring at the shelves like something might rearrange itself into comfort. There it was, the brine starter kit. Fresh rosemary, orange peel, peppercorn. A tradition, I guess. One I held onto for longer than I should have. I pulled it out and stood over the sink for a moment. The air smelled sharp from the citrus. Clean. Hopeful. I held the bag a second longer, then dropped it straight into the trash. I didn't cry. I thought maybe I would, but it didn't come. Instead, I checked the family group chat. My name hadn't been mentioned once that day. Not even a Ray, you okay? Or, where you at? Nothing. Photos of table arrangements. Linen napkins folded like little birds. Jolene's boyfriend Craig was tagged in a post showing off the wine he brought. That man has never said a word to me. Never shook my hand. Not once. The caption under the photo said, "So lucky to have such a perfect, polished evening planned with people who matter most." People who matter most. It wasn't just a missed call anymore. It was a message. I thought about texting Mom back. Just a single line. Thank you for the clarity. But I didn't. I didn't go to the garage either. Not yet. I sat at the kitchen table, lights off, shadows long and quiet around me. Through the garage door's small window, I could see the blue glow of my torch setup. I had a job lined up tomorrow, a gate repair for a family that probably didn't know the first thing about a welding torch, but still paid on time and said thank you. I sat there for a while, hands folded, breathing slow. Then I whispered it to the dark. So this is who I am to them. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, fully clothed, eyes open in the dark. The hum from the fridge was louder than usual, and every time the heat kicked on, it startled me. At some point, I moved to the kitchen, poured black coffee into a chipped mug, and sat back at the table where everything had started to shift. By sunrise, I still hadn't turned on the lights. It wasn't until mid-morning that I finally got up and grabbed my phone. I had 3 missed texts, one from Vera, my cousin on Mom's side. We weren't close, not in a weekly chat way, but she always remembered my birthday and had a habit of noticing what others tried to ignore. Her message was short. You might want to see this. Attached was a video clip, shaky camera work, background chatter, a living room decorated in gold accents. And there was Jolene, standing next to Craig, holding a wine glass like she belonged in a Pottery Barn catalog. The lighting wasn't flattering, but the sound was clear. Someone off-screen asked, "So you have any siblings?" Jolene laughed. "Technically, yeah, but I'm pretty much an only child." She didn't stutter, didn't blink, just said it like she was stating her Starbucks order. I didn't throw my phone, I didn't scream, I didn't even hit replay. I just stood there, still holding the mug, now cold in my hand, and looked out the window. That line, it wasn't the first betrayal, but it was the most honest, because it proved something I'd been trying not to believe for years. It wasn't just that they forgot me, it's that they meant to. Later that afternoon, I stopped at the gas station on my way to the hardware supply store. I had to pick up a new grinder wheel and a box of gloves. I wasn't planning to go inside, but I needed caffeine. The coffee machine was busted, so I grabbed a bottled one from the fridge near the register. That's when I saw the newspaper. It was sitting right there by the cash wrap, folded open to the community section. The headline read, "Celebrating Local Success. The Madison Family Hosts Thanksgiving in Tulsa." There was a full-color photo. Jolene in the center, Craig standing just behind her, with his hand resting on her shoulder. Mom and Dad on either side of them, dressed like they were auditioning for a catalog spread. Their house looked cleaner than I remembered it. It was the house I was still helping pay for. My name wasn't in the article, not in the caption, not even as a passing mention. I stared at it for a few seconds longer than I should have. The cashier asked if I needed anything else, and I shook my head. My voice wouldn't have worked even if I'd tried. Back at the shop, I kept to myself. Mike could tell I wasn't in the mood, and to his credit, he didn't push. We had a couple minor repairs that day, hinges on a metal gate, a custom trailer hitch, nothing that required too much brain power. I took the bathroom break mid-afternoon. That's when I remembered it. The conversation from months ago. One of the rare times Jolene and I were alone, just the two of us. I had said, "You can joke all you want, call me Metal Mouth, or Scrap Queen to your friends. I don't care, just don't ever say you're an only child. That's the one thing I ask." She'd nodded. Not a word of argument. No roll of her eyes. Just nodded and moved on. And now, here we were. I rinsed the grease off my fingers, stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, but not broken. Worn, but not soft. That night, I went through my phone and turned off the tuition payment reminders. All of them. The email notices from Jolene's school. The calendar pop-ups. I deleted the recurring grocery order I used to send to Mom's place every year. A gesture, I thought, that meant something. I opened my laptop and started printing. Not to start a fight, not to prove a point, just to document the things I knew they'd pretend didn't happen. Tuition receipts, wire transfers, screenshots of texts and requests, the mortgage assistance documents I signed when they needed help just for a little while. It took an hour. I put everything in a manila folder and labeled it with a Sharpie, in case they forget. Then I opened the family group chat. I scrolled past Jolene's long message about healing through holidays, about gratitude and forgiveness, and, what matters most, is love. She had attached a photo of the dinner setup: napkin rings, candles, fancy cutlery. Under it, she wrote, "No matter what's happened, we're still family. Let's focus on what unites us." No mention of me. Not once. I didn't respond. I didn't leave a snarky comment. I simply clicked Leave Group. No alert. No fanfare. No one reached out. Not one. The envelope sat on the kitchen table for half an hour before I touched it again. Thick paper, the kind lawyers and banks use. I ran my finger over the words I'd written, for future reference. Not a threat, not a warning, just a reminder for myself, what I had done, what they had asked for, what I had given. I slid it into the fireproof box under the counter and clicked the latch shut. Then I rinsed out my mug, tied my hair back, and headed to the shop. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and the streets were already busier than usual. Trucks making deliveries, people crowding gas stations with coolers and bags of ice. It had rained early in the morning, so the pavement still shimmered in patches where the sun hadn't dried it yet. Inside the shop, Mike and I were finishing up the last 2 jobs before we closed for the long weekend. He worked quietly. I appreciated that. Every now and then, he'd glance at me, like he wanted to ask if I was okay. But he didn't. That kind of silence is its own kind of loyalty. Just before lunch, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Jolene. Subject line, tuition reminder. Message, "Hey, just making sure you've got the next school payment scheduled. It's due by decount, too. Thanks." No greeting, no context, no question about my day, my work, my life. Just, thanks. I scrolled through old emails, 3 years' worth. They were all the same, short, directive, unsigned like I was a bank, not a sister. Never once a thank you that wasn't tied to a due date. I closed the inbox and slid my phone face down on the counter. Later that day, back at home, I pulled out the folder with the mortgage statements. The ones from the house. The one they'd be gathering in tomorrow without me. That house was in Jolene's name. That part was true. We'd done it that way because she had better credit, better standing when Dad got sick. But the payments? The upkeep? The property taxes that had almost gotten them evicted 2 years ago? That was all me. I looked at a framed photo by the front door. One from a 4th of July, long ago. Everyone was there. I was there. We looked like a family. Now, the only time my name came up was when a bill was due. I placed the mortgage papers next to the tuition records. And then I remembered something else. After locking up for the night, I stopped by the grocery store for a last-minute supply pickup. In the frozen foods aisle, I spotted my father. Not in person, not literally, but his voice. He was on the phone, walking down another aisle, talking louder than he realized. I moved closer, not meaning to eavesdrop, but unable to stop myself. "I just think we need to be careful," he said. "Raylene's always been, well, sensitive. It's not like she doesn't help, but let's be honest. She's not exactly part of Craig's world." A pause. "I mean, come on. She's a welder. She wouldn't understand." That line, those 5 words, settled in me like iron dropped in water. She wouldn't understand. As if my work made me incapable of grasping anything that wasn't covered in soot or wrapped in steel. As if the cost of being useful was being invisible. I drove home in silence, parked in the back, and didn't bother turning on the porch light again. It didn't feel like mine anyway. Inside, I changed into my old workshop hoodie and pulled out my laptop. I backed up everything, bank records, invoices, loan cosign papers, onto a USB drive. I labeled folders by year. I added date stamps to every screenshot. 17 tuition payments, 48 months of mortgage coverage, several direct deposits to my parents' account labeled for groceries and for taxes. All of it organized, time-stamped, irrefutable. I didn't do it because I was planning to use it. I did it because I finally understood I had to stop pretending it didn't matter. Some families say thank you, some just expect it again. When I finished, I pulled out a clean envelope, placed the USB inside, and sealed it. In permanent marker, I wrote, "For future reference, Isnias." Then, I put it next to the plaque I got when I finished my apprenticeship, before Jolene even started college. The irony didn't feel poetic, it just felt true. I didn't sleep in that morning, not because I had anything pressing to do, but because my body no longer knew what rest was supposed to feel like. The air inside the house was cold and still. I kept the curtains drawn, not to hide, but to keep the world at arm's length for a little while longer. Thanksgiving had always felt more like an obligation than a celebration, but this year, it felt like a statement, a confirmation. The dinner table was set across town in the same house I'd helped save more than once, and my name wouldn't be spoken over mashed potatoes or beneath fake laughter. I heated up leftover chili and sat on the couch with a blanket over my knees. I didn't bother with music or TV. The silence suited me better. At 10:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. The text came from Mom, but the message, it wasn't meant for me. "Let's keep it polished tonight. Don't worry about Raylene showing up. I told her it's for the best." There was no accidental about it. Not really. She might have hit the wrong contact, but the contents were perfectly deliberate. No apology, no softness, just a reassurance that I'd been erased properly. I stared at the screen long enough for the light to fade back to black. Not one part of me felt surprised. Not anymore. I set the phone on the table, face up. No need to hide from it now. By noon, the sounds outside began to shift. Car doors opening, laughter carrying over fences. Somewhere, a football game played on someone else's TV. I didn't mind being still. I didn't miss the noise. At 1:08 p.m., I got a message from Vera. She didn't say hello, didn't dance around it, just sent a video clip with no caption. She knew better than to sugarcoat. In the clip, Jolene stood in someone's living room, glass in hand, perfectly lit by fairy lights strung around the ceiling. Craig was next to her, nodding like he'd heard the story before. A woman's voice, off-screen, asked the question. "So, do you have any siblings?" Jolene smiled. "Well, I guess I'm technically not an only child, but in the ways that matter, yeah." It was said with the same tone you'd use to talk about bad weather. Mildly inconvenient. Out of your control. I watched it once. Then again. I didn't forward it. Didn't screen record. I just saved it and placed the phone screen down again. She said it like I'd never existed. And maybe, in her mind, I hadn't. Not in any version that fit the story she liked to tell. At 2:30, I joined a scheduled Zoom call with the Oklahoma Welding Women's Guild. I'd nearly forgotten I'd accepted the invite last month. They were honoring me with an award. Something small but kind. Blue Collar Excellence, Trailblazer Award. Someone introduced me by saying, "We need more women like Raylene, showing young girls that this kind of work is something to be proud of." I smiled. I thanked them. I meant every word. I didn't cry on camera, even when they asked if I wanted to say anything to other young women starting out. I said, "You don't have to dress it up. You don't have to apologize for getting your hands dirty. If it pays the bills and builds something real, it's worth more than a polished title that does nothing but decorate a resume." They clapped. A few typed messages into the chat box. I clicked "Leave meeting" without waiting for it to end. I placed the award beside the envelope from earlier. Two truths, one forged with effort, one sealed in silence. Later that evening, I returned to the table. This time, I opened my laptop, not to search, not to escape, but to create something I hadn't made before. A letter. Not addressed, not dated, just titled, "If Questioned." I didn't start with anger. I started with timelines. Tuition breakdowns, semester by semester. Mortgage dates, grocery payments during flu season. Texts asking me to spot them again because Dad's check hadn't cleared. I included the first time I wasn't invited to dinner. The first time Jolene said, "Just keep it quiet about the house." The first time, I was cropped out of a photo before it hit social media. It was just facts, no adjectives, no commentary. I wasn't writing to beg, I wasn't writing to shame. I was writing because truth had been drowned in enough half glasses of Chardonnay at that dining room table, and I didn't plan on letting that story be the only one anyone remembered. When I finished, I printed the letter and slipped it into the file folder alongside everything else. The folder was thick now, heavy in a way I could feel in my hands. I took it to the small safe I kept under the garage workbench, dialed the code, placed the folder gently inside. As I closed the door, I paused. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt prepared. I looked at the locked safe and whispered, "I hope you never make me use it." The garage was still warm from earlier. I leaned against the workbench, arms crossed, staring at the safe. The door was locked. The folder was inside. That should have been the end of it. But I knew it wasn't. I walked back into the house, boot heels tapping against the concrete. The evening had settled in, heavy and quiet, the kind that makes everything sound louder than it is. I turned off the kitchen light, letting the soft orange hue from the porch seep in. Then I opened my laptop. It took a few seconds for the school's portal to load. I'd logged in so many times over the years. The browser autofilled the credentials. I navigated straight to the payment section. The pending charge sat at the top. Spring tuition, $19,000 and change. I didn't hesitate. One click, cancel, confirm. A small notification popped up. Authorization removed. Payment not scheduled. That was it. I sat there for a moment longer, then closed the lid, walked outside, and turned off the porch light. For the first time in years, I wasn't on call, not for them, not for her. Around 8:30 that night, the first text came in. "Hey, did you forget the payment?" I didn't respond. 15 minutes later, "School's saying nothing's processed. Is there an issue?" Still nothing. Then, "Raylene?" I opened the drawer next to the couch and dropped the phone in, screen down. If there was an emergency, it wasn't mine to handle anymore. I poured myself a glass of water. The house was quiet again, no buzzing, no reminders. At 9:52, the phone rang. Landline. Hardly anyone used it anymore, which meant one thing, Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. I picked up on the third ring. "I don't know what you're doing," she started, voice already raised. "But this is going to destroy your sister's future." I didn't say a word. "She's counting on that degree. She has deadlines, Raylene, responsibilities. She's already told people she's covered for this semester." Still, I waited. Then came the line that did it. "You're going to make the whole family look bad." There it was. Not concern for Jolene. Not a trace of accountability, just fear of exposure. I inhaled, slow and controlled. My voice didn't shake when I asked, would Craig's family disinvite their own daughter from dinner for having a job? She didn't answer. I waited, but there was nothing. Just that kind of silence you get when someone knows they can't lie their way out, so they say nothing at all. I heard the shift. Her breathing changed. The guilt was there, barely masked by her tone when she tried again. "I'm just saying, you could have at least told her first." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. She never told me when she erased me. I hung up. Minutes later, my father's name flashed on the screen. I answered. "Ray, I know you're upset, but this isn't how families handle things." "No," I said. "Families don't send people away from dinner tables either." He sighed hard, like he was the one exhausted by me. "We all have to make sacrifices sometimes." "I already did," I said, "and none of you noticed." He tried to talk over me, but I didn't let him. "You want me to keep paying? Fine. Tell me who's willing to match me, dollar for dollar. Who's putting their name on the check this time?" He didn't respond. I waited 5 seconds, then hung up. It wasn't anger that carried me. It was peace. The kind that comes when you stop letting other people rent space in your head for free. I reopened the laptop. I didn't go back to the payment screen. Instead, I opened the family group chat, the one I had muted long ago. The messages had stacked up. Jolene's texts now read like panic. If I don't pay by Monday, I get dropped from the semester. This could ruin everything. You're not seriously going to leave me hanging like this. I stared at the screen, then typed slowly. No one said thank you for what I gave, so don't expect me to apologize for what I'm taking back. Then I closed the thread. No more debates. No more explanations. The thread went quiet. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled, and closed my eyes. The sound of the shop next door locking up for the night drifted through the window. A cold front had rolled in. I got up, threw on a hoodie, and opened the back door. The sky above was still. No wind. Just stars and silence. For once, I wasn't bracing for the next message. I wasn't waiting to be needed. The morning after the cold front rolled in, the air outside had a bite to it. I could feel it coming through the garage walls while I sanded down a set of hinges for a custom gate order. My fingers were stiff, but my thoughts were clear, sharper than they'd been in days. Maybe silence really was a kind of healing. That clarity didn't last long. Around mid-morning, my phone vibrated on the corner of the workbench. I glanced over, expecting another delivery confirmation or maybe something from Vera, but it was a voicemail from Mom. I let it sit for a while before I finally hit play, wiping my hands on a towel as her voice filled the room. Hi, sweetheart. Look, maybe we were wrong not to include you last week. It was never personal. It was just... With Craig's family, we wanted everything to feel smooth. If you want, I can mention you next time we see him. I'm sure he wouldn't mind. There it was. The olive branch made of plastic. If you want. Like acknowledgement was optional. I hit replay, not because I didn't hear it the first time, but because I needed to make sure she actually said it that way. She did. She'd offered to mention me, not apologize, not ask for a conversation, just name drop me if I felt like I'd earned it. I walked into the kitchen and sat down at the table where the envelope had once been. The safe was locked now, but my patience wasn't. I pulled my phone out again and opened a new message. I typed it out slowly, then read it aloud once. I was never asking to be introduced. I just asked not to be hidden. You couldn't give me that. Then I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. I knew it wouldn't come. Instead, I opened my accounting sheet on the laptop and moved Jolene's tuition line item from active to closed. I added a note in the comments. Final installment canceled. It felt good, not satisfying. Just finished. That night, I was halfway through reheating some leftover chicken when the phone rang again. This time, it was Jolene. I hesitated before answering. The last time we spoke, she was still pretending this wasn't happening. Ray, she said, breathless like she'd run somewhere. I don't know what you're doing, but I've already applied for 3 externships. They're assuming I'm finishing this semester. If I get dropped, I lose all of it. Her voice wasn't angry. It cracked around the edges. I'm not trying to fight, she added quickly. I need this. You know how much I've put into it. I sat there, holding the phone to my ear, letting the silence stretch out. Then I spoke. If I wasn't good enough to sit at the table with them, my money shouldn't be either. She didn't respond. It's not revenge, I said quietly. It's a refund. I hung up. No yelling, no drama. Just a final line. I stood at the counter, watching the microwave tick down the last 30 seconds on my dinner. The plastic cover spun slowly. I didn't even care if the food was warm. I ate quickly, alone. Then, I put my plate in the sink and walked to the garage. The air smelled like cold metal and scorched wood. I took a deep breath, tied on my apron, and pulled on my gloves. I needed to make something, not to prove a point, just to let my hands do the talking. I grabbed some scrap tubing and a small square of steel. I welded together a table frame, uneven on purpose. 1 chair, just one. Then I painted the chair gold. Not a flashy, clean gold. A muted, almost tarnished finish, that looked better in low light. And once it dried, I burned it, just enough to crack the surface. I didn't smooth it out. I didn't fix the balance. On the base, I welded 3 words. No seat saved. It wasn't art for them. It was truth for me. I took a photo of the sculpture the next morning, just as the sun started to break through the frost on the windows. I posted it on my account. No caption, no hashtags, no location. By noon, it had been shared nearly 200 times. People were tagging friends, sharing their own stories in the comments. She built the table. They didn't even give her a chair. This hit me harder than I expected. Some families don't need to be fixed. They need to be left behind. I didn't respond to any of them. But I saw that Jolene had liked the post. That was all the confirmation I needed. She'd seen it. She knew. By Sunday afternoon, the wind had picked up across Tulsa. The sky was a flat gray, the kind that sits on your shoulders like a warning. I just finished cleaning the welding tips and sweeping the garage when Vera called. She never calls. Ever. All she said was, "Check your email." I dried my hands, opened my inbox, and found a subject line waiting for me. Forwarded message. Madison Family Dinner. Attached was a screenshot of an invitation, photos of the floral arrangements, and a long email thread. My sister's careful planning, her tone saccharine, all punctuated with phrases like, "Let's make this flawless," and "Craig's parents are very detail-oriented." Below, it was Vera's message. "They should see the whole picture, don't you think?" There wasn't a question in her voice when we spoke next. It was already decided. By 5 o'clock, an email titled "Family Integrity Full Picture" had hit half a dozen inboxes with a timed send feature. I didn't ask how she got their addresses. I didn't need to know. Inside that email were PDFs of every tuition payment I'd ever made on Jolene's behalf. Mortgage documentation tied to the house where the dinner was being hosted. Screenshots of texts. The video of Jolene saying she was, functionally, an only child. A link to the welding union's award announcement. No subjectivity, no rant, just truth. The party started just after 6. I didn't go. I wasn't invited. But I could picture the whole scene in my mind. Their dining room always felt like a stage. White plates, silver trim, crystal glasses that no one could pronounce correctly. Candles flickering just right. Mom fluttering between rooms like a hostess trying too hard. Jolene, smiling at the head of the table, Craig at her side. At 6:42 p.m., the first buzz hit. A phone screen lit up. Then another. A low hum of confusion. Forks paused midair. Someone cleared their throat and asked, "What's this?" Craig scrolled through the documents in silence. His father frowned, glanced at Jolene, then back to the screen. Craig's mother raised an eyebrow the way women do when they've spent decades in rooms filled with lies. The same eyebrow Mom pretended not to notice. Jolene went pale. I wasn't there, but I'd bet my boots she tried to speak. She always did when the silence wasn't hers to control, but Craig beat her to it. "This whole evening," he said, folding his napkin slowly, "is beautiful, but apparently it's not the only thing built on borrowed credit." He stood, thanked everyone for the meal, and left. Just like that. No shouting, no dramatic exits. That was the part Jolene never understood. Not all storms make noise. Hours later, while I was fixing a loose hinge on the back gate under the yellow shop light, Vera texted me again. "Local bloggers picked it up, it's spreading." I didn't ask which blogger. I just wiped the sweat from my brow and kept working. The post came out around midnight. The Welder Behind the Law Degree, a Thanksgiving story. It was well written, fair, not clickbait. It talked about sacrifice, the invisible backbone of family success, and how some people build legacy in silence, while others build status on top of it. I didn't comment, didn't share, but I did post one more photo. It was the sculpture again, no seat saved, now displayed in the corner of my shop, next to the union plaque and a box of spare bolts. This time, I added a caption. "If you don't invite the builder, don't sit at their table." The post went viral within hours. It didn't matter anymore. The damage, if you want to call it that, had been done. Jolene's externship coordinator emailed a polite request for clarification about her academic funding. The firm where she hoped to intern had paused all communication, citing character alignment reviews. Our parents, to their credit, stopped trying to spin it. Maybe even they couldn't talk their way around hard numbers and undeniable timestamps. By sunrise, I had a few hundred new followers, women from every state, mostly welders, pipe fitters, mechanics, and mothers who wrote things like, "My sister took the credit. I took the night shifts." I cried reading this. Thank you. Your story is mine, just with different names. I read them all, every single one. And when the bell above the shop door rang at 9:03 a.m., I didn't have to look up to know who it was. She didn't knock, didn't call ahead. Jolene stood there in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, no makeup, hair pulled into a messy bun that didn't look intentional. She didn't speak right away, but her eyes, those wide, exhausted eyes, were screaming. She didn't say anything at first, just stood in the doorway like a stranger who'd taken a wrong turn. Her face was bare, and for once, it wasn't because she was trying to look effortless. Jolene looked worn down, but it wasn't the kind of tired that comes from work. It was the exhaustion that creeps in when a lie runs out of road. I didn't offer her a seat. I didn't reach for a second mug. She stepped inside anyway, walking toward the bench where I kept scrap metal stacked in neat rows. Then, in one clumsy motion, she dropped a stack of papers onto my work table. They fanned out across the surface, printouts of blog headlines, screenshots, tuition receipts. The last one sat front and center. Oklahoma's quiet backbone, the sister who paid in silence. I didn't need to read them. I'd lived every line. "You destroyed my life," she snapped, voice cracking mid-sentence. "For attention. You always needed to be the one people felt sorry for." I wiped the dust from my hands and set my welding mask down slowly, never breaking eye contact. "You want to talk about attention?" I asked. "You erased me from pictures, holidays, even your stories, then got surprised when people filled in the blanks themselves." "You think this is fair?" she fired back. "You could have just said something. You didn't have to humiliate me." I took a step forward, not to threaten, but to make sure she saw that I wasn't shrinking anymore. "Fair?" I said. "I begged you not to pretend I didn't exist. You did it anyway, and I kept quiet because I thought if I kept giving, eventually, you'd remember I mattered." She looked like she wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come, so I kept going. "You're not mad because I lied. You're mad because I stopped helping you hide yours." Jolene's hands trembled slightly as she reached down, gathered the papers, and tried to stack them again like she could make them neat enough to erase what they said. "I lost Craig," she whispered. "You turned him against me." I almost laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I walked to the corner of the shop and opened the safe. The folder was still there, untouched. I carried it back to the table and dropped it in front of her. "I didn't turn him against you," I said. "He just saw what I've seen for years." She stared at the folder, but didn't open it. "That's everything," I added. "Every dime, every bill, every silence you mistook for consent." Jolene looked up then, eyes red, but not from tears, more like someone who'd run out of energy to pretend. "This isn't revenge," I told her. "It's what happens when you treat someone like a utility instead of a sister." She didn't say a word. I walked over to the front door and opened it, letting the cold air spill in. "You can take the folder or leave it, but this is the last time we speak." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, quietly, she picked up the folder, turned, and walked out. No slamming door. No final insult. Just the creak of hinges and the soft click as the door closed behind her. I stood there for a while, listening to the emptiness she left behind. Then I turned off the shop light and walked back to the garage. That night, I opened my phone for the last time under my name. I deleted the family group chat permanently, not just left it. Gone. I changed my number, not out of spite, but for peace. I opened the scholarship application I'd been working on for months, the one I'd been too busy, or too scared, to finalize. This time, I filled in the last fields. Raylene Grant Welding Scholarship, in honor of the women who build silently. Under sponsoring name, I used my mother's maiden name. Because sometimes you rebuild your legacy by going around the wreckage. I submitted it before midnight. No announcements, no applause. Just quiet resolve. I went to sleep with the window cracked open, letting the cool air settle over the room. No dreams, no regrets, just space to breathe. The next morning, I walked out to the mailbox with my coffee. Tucked between ads and bills was a small white envelope with my name on it. No return address. But I didn't need one. I knew that handwriting. I stood on the porch for a moment, feeling the weight of it in my hand. Then I dropped it straight into the recycling bin. Not out of bitterness, but because some things don't need to be reopened. The envelope hit the bottom of the recycling bin with the softest sound, barely louder than the breeze slipping under the garage door. Still, it echoed through me like a gavel, final and unflinching. I stood there for a second longer, coffee cooling in my hand, then turned back toward the house. Outside, the neighborhood was stringing lights. Wreaths were going up. Inflatable snowmen were beginning to invade yards. December had officially taken over. I didn't decorate, not out of spite, just didn't feel like pretending. That afternoon, the shop was quiet. Orders had slowed for the season, and I wasn't in a rush to change that. I did a few quotes over email, polished a metal gate design, then stepped outside for some air. I leaned against the doorframe when the phone rang. It was the landline. Again. I let it ring once. Twice. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, curiosity maybe, had me pick it up. Raylene. It was Mom. I didn't answer right away. She filled the silence. Just wanted to see how you were doing. I heard the weather's turning colder. Small talk, safe ground. I'm fine, I said. She hesitated. I could hear her swallow. Then, you know, your sister isn't doing well. I waited. We were hoping you'd reach out, just to talk. Maybe help her through this. She's been struggling. I didn't raise my voice, didn't take the bait. I just spoke plainly. No one reached out for me when I was the one left out in the cold. Mom was quiet. I think she was holding her breath. I didn't offer more. I didn't owe more. I hope you're well, she said at last. Click. That was the last time we spoke that year. Later that week, I received an email from the local trade school. One of their instructors had seen the article. They wanted to know if I'd come speak to their senior welding students about my career, my business, and what it meant to be a woman in the trades. I said yes. I expected a small turnout, maybe a few curious eyes, a few half-hearted questions. Instead, I walked into a packed multi-purpose room. Folding chairs filled, some folks standing in the back. Students, instructors, a few parents, mostly working-class folks. You could see it in their boots, their calloused hands, the way they sat forward when I started to talk. I didn't share gossip. I didn't trash my family. I shared what I'd built. I talked about the first time I burned through a weld and kept going, about the old Ford pickup I'd helped rebuild in high school, the one I drove until it rattled itself into retirement, about choosing a path that didn't come with fanfare or holiday cards, but one that fed me, clothed me, and kept the lights on when everyone else pretended not to notice I was there. When I finished, the room stood in applause. A woman around my age approached me, eyes damp but steady. "You remind me of my daughter," she said. "She thinks she has to fit into a mold to be loved." I smiled. Then maybe the mold's the problem, not her. Afterward, I sat in my truck with the heater blowing on my boots and stared at the building. I thought about how many times I'd waited for someone to see me, really see me. Turns out all I needed was to stand still long enough for the dust to settle and realize I wasn't invisible. I was just facing the wrong direction. That night, I ate dinner alone at the table I'd built myself. Heavy cedar, solid legs, no fancy finish. Just honest wood. No centerpiece, no cloth napkins. Just a bowl of stew, a chunk of bread, and a cup of cider still warm from the stove. The chair across from me was empty. But it didn't ache. I didn't miss the noise, or the performance. I looked at that chair, and I knew. If anyone ever wanted to sit there again, they'd have to bring more than their appetite. They'd have to bring their honesty, their presence, their ability to see someone beyond what's convenient. Because I wasn't waiting anymore. I was never asking for a seat. I was building the table.